Hey there! In this video, I want to share with you how I learn new words as somebody who speaks 5 languages. Now, to begin with, I do not have one sole method that works every time. In fact, sometimes it's enough for me to memorize the word the first time I see it and remember it for good. That said, in situations when the words refuse to stick, I call in the reinforcement, a collection of different methods and techniques that help me to not only memorize the new vocabulary, but also expand it in the process. Let's dive in. First of all, when it comes to capturing new words, I always and without fail write them down. In fact, I keep dedicated vocabulary notebooks for every single foreign language I speak, and doing this helps me to better memorize new words and actually create visual associations with them. For example, back in high school, I would color code different words and decorate the entire pages in my vocabulary notebook just to separate the words that I learned in a specific text from the rest. Personally, I'm an extremely visual learner. I remember that I learned the word to contemplate in a text about Tasmania in Upstream C1 English textbook, and that I heard the word condescending in the movie Social Network. If you are a visual learner too, I highly recommend you to incorporate colors, textures, stickers, and that whole shebang to add some visual element to the new vocabulary. Secondly, which is perhaps what I should have started with, is that I write down words in their infinitive form, together with their grammar case and preposition. Let me explain. Let's take as an example this sentence. She insisted on taking notes by hand. If I didn't know the word insisted, I would write it down as to insist on doing something. If I were to write the mere insist, I might have produced a sentence like she insisted for taking notes by hand, which would have been completely wrong. This way, by writing down words in their pure form, I'm basically saving myself from making mistakes in the future. What's more, whenever I'm learning a new verb in a language with tricky conjugations like French, I like to conjugate this verb aloud or in my mind every time I see it in my notebook. And it does take a bit more effort than simply looking at the conjugations or even writing them down, because it basically forces you to actively recall it, but it really helps me come up with the correct version of this verb much faster and easier every time I have to speak that language. Thirdly, if a new word that I learned is a more advanced or, on the contrary, a simpler synonym of a word that I already know, I would write them down together. For example, I would write auspicious equals promising. In my mind, synonyms are a key indicator of a rich vocabulary, and grouping them together means that every time you're going to be flipping the pages of your notebook, you're going to be seeing these words together repeatedly and therefore memorizing them together. And it will definitely come in handy in your writing because, let's face it, having synonyms at your disposal does prevent you from using the same word 4 times in one paragraph. Another thing that I want to touch on is collocations, which are the most common expressions that the word is used in. You can find those easily in monolingual dictionaries, and I've made an entire video about this if you want to check it out. But personally, I love writing down collocations because they immediately give me an idea of where else I can use this new word and what's the most natural way of doing it. For example, if you take the word point, it's used in a number of ready-made prêt-à-porter expressions, such as to make a point, a focal point, at some point, beside the point, and so on. An important thing to keep in mind when it comes to collocations is that they should not overwhelm you. Because, let's be real, there are dozens of collocations with the word point, but I do not need to remember them all at once. In fact, I will not be able to. In this case, when you are dangerously close to overwhelm, my advice to you is to look at all those expressions and to select a maximum of 5 or maybe 7 that you can actually see yourself using in your daily life. This way, you'll be benefiting from them instead of feeling like you're being inundated by 50 phrases that all sound similar. Speaking of phrases, I also love writing down the phrase that I found the new word in. For example, going back to the word auspicious, I would write it down as a phrase, an auspicious beginning. In fact, I would also write down an inauspicious beginning because sometimes when it makes sense, the negation is quite useful too. Another method that I refer to quite frequently is word formation, which is basically grouping together words that share the same root. For example, from a simple verb to move, you can get a ton of others like to remove, movement, movable, immovable, moving, and so on. The beauty of this technique is that instead of memorizing these words separately at different times, you get them all at once. And because they all share that common root, it's super easy to remember them together. I must also mention here that I've never used this technique for every single unknown word. Again, to avoid the overwhelm. However, I did find it extremely useful when I was at an intermediate level in French. It was actually one of the techniques that helped me make sense of this language. Finally, one of my absolute favorite techniques for memorizing new words is creating my own example sentences with them. This helps me to imagine how I would use a new word in my own life and also play out different scenarios or situations in a foreign language in my head. If the new words are stubborn and no matter what you do, you cannot remember them, try selecting 3 to 4 words at random and putting them into one sentence. For example, let's take words like an inauspicious start, a pyrotechnic, and a flower trellis, and create a sentence with them. The one that I came up with reads something like, a pyrotechnic accidentally set the flower trellis on fire, marking an inauspicious start to the show. Now, I'll never forget these words again, and neither will you. On this note, somebody in the comments under one of my videos has even suggested taking a bunch of new words and writing a short story with them. And if you want to be particularly challenged, you can even use those words in a specific order, which is a great way to not only memorize them, but also to train your creative writing muscle. Okay, now that we've collected our words and explored their formation, context, and even played around with example sentences, we can now say that we've properly acquainted ourselves with the new vocabulary and created strong associations with it. And now it's time to lock it into our long-term memory using 2 things: spaced repetition and active practice. Active practice, either through writing or speaking, helps you internalize these words and move them from a passive realm where you understand them when you see or hear them to active use where they actually resurface in your memory at an opportune moment. When it comes to writing, I tend to practice new words when I journal, and I've spoken more about it in this video. As far as speaking goes, I am painfully aware that not everybody has foreign friends to practice the language with or even an opportunity to go abroad. That said, I've been in this exact situation myself many times, and what helped me the most was actually speaking to myself in a foreign language. And I know it sounds bizarre, but it's surprisingly effective. First of all, you're doing this in the privacy of your own home, so nobody can hear and judge you. And secondly, you can correct your mistakes as you go, pause to think, and then continue speaking at your own pace. It's a win-win. However, if you do have foreign friends, the next time you're going to be having a call with them, you can think ahead about the topics that you're going to discuss and look at the list of your new words to potentially include some of those in your conversation. Again, the beauty of having a wide vocabulary range is that you can express yourself in the most genuine and accurate way. So why not prepare yourself beforehand? I also want to talk more about spaced repetition, because you do need it if you want to move your new words into your long-term memory. Personally, there were times when I was taking my vocabulary notebook with me everywhere and revising new words on the subway. But it is cumbersome and, frankly speaking, inconvenient. These days, I like to do it at breakfast or when I'm having a cup of coffee at home. It literally takes 3 minutes, plus I find that reading words loud makes it slightly more efficient because it engages more of my attention and prevents me from glancing over the pages. When I'm outside, I'm using Quizlet, especially if I have 5 or 10 minutes to kill waiting in line somewhere. Again, quizzes are much more fun and engaging than simply flipping through the flashcards, and as we all know it, deeper engagement leads to better memorization. In conclusion, I advise you to approach new words with the mindset of an explorer. Instead of looking at them as the dead weight that you struggle to retain, try to see them as instruments that will allow you to express yourself in a much more nuanced and authentic way. I hope that my methods and techniques will help you with this. Again, I'd like to repeat that I do not use all of them for every single new word that I encounter. I follow my curiosity, I assess my needs, and I trust my gut. I hope you found this video useful, and if you have any techniques of your own that help you better memorize new words, do leave them in the comments below. I love experimenting with new methods. And yes, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.